Another round of 2020 hopefuls are gearing up for tonight's second Democratic debate in Detroit. 10 candidates faced off last night. Senators Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren defended their progressive policies on health care, immigration, and college tuition.
And even though candidates clashed over ideologies and agendas, they agreed on what they believe to be the most important issue: beating President Trump.
Donald Trump disgraces the office of president every single day. And anyone on this stage tonight or tomorrow night would be a far better president.
So we've got to get rid of Donald Trump. But you don't decriminalize people just walking into the United States. If they're seeking asylum, of course we want to welcome them.
We've got a crisis on our hands. And it's not just a crisis of immigration, it's a crisis of cruelty and incompetence that has created a humanitarian disaster on our southern border. It is a stain on the United States of America.
We should deal with the tragedy of the uninsured and give everyone health care as a right. But why do we got to be the party of taking something away from them? We don't have to do that. We can give everyone health care and allow people to have choice. That's the American way.
Medicare for All is comprehensive. It covers all health care needs for senior citizens. It will finally include dental care, hearing aids, and eyeglasses.
But you don't know.
Second of all.
You don't know that,
Second
Bernie.
of all.
We'll come to you in a second,
I do know,
Congressman.
and I wrote the damn bill.
Like far too many people in America, I've been personally impacted by gun violence. Had an 11-year-old nephew, Jeremy, shot and killed on a playground. We need to start looking at this as a public health issue, not a political issue.
9 times he said he wanted universal background checks. The next day he goes and he meets with the NRA and he folds. As your president, I will not fold.
I don't understand why anybody goes to all the trouble of running for president of the United States just to talk about what we really can't do and shouldn't fight for.
The bottom line is, you talk to any economist, there is not a single example in history where a trade war had a winner. Trade wars are for losers.
We must not only stand up against Donald Trump and defeat him in this next election, but we must also ensure that we don't just tolerate or respect our differences, but we embrace them.
Democrats win when we figure out what is right and we get out there and fight for it. I am not afraid. And for Democrats to win, you can't be afraid either.
It's time to stop worrying about what the Republicans will say. Look, if it's true that if we embrace a far-left agenda, they're going to say we're a bunch of crazy socialists. If we embrace a conservative agenda, you know what they're going to do? They're going to say we're a bunch of crazy socialists. So let's just stand up for the right policy, go out there and defend it.
All right, so for more on this, we want to bring in CBSN political contributor and Democratic strategist Antjuan Seawright and CBS News contributor and Republican strategist Leslie Sanchez. All right,
what's up, guys?
Lady and gentlemen, Antjuan, I'm going to start with you, and I'm just going to start with sort of the broad, overreaching question, right? Your big takeaway from last night's debate. I thought to myself, well, this is a very reasonable discussion of the issues, and that's refreshing.
Well, I think the biggest takeaway from the debate was that healthcare will not only drive and define who we are as a party, but I think it would be a large conversation in how and who is the next president of the United States.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is, regardless of the disagreements you saw in how we improve healthcare or how we get healthcare right, I think there was a big commitment to the fact that we have to do something because the Republicans who are in charge of this country have failed the American people on the issue. I also think there was a laser focus on quality of life issues that continue to be fleshed out within our party, and we see that regardless of the disagreements on the stage, I thought it all went back to that idea, that notion. And the fact of the matter is, I think we saw Elizabeth Warren display why she was the front runner that night and why she's been running second to Joe Biden in almost every poll I've seen.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious, just did you see somebody, Leslie, that could beat Donald Trump?
No. And a lot of, not tonight, not last night. Tonight's a different story. You know, you're talking about the front runners, meaning Joe Biden and some of the other, and how that dynamic is going to shake out, what they talk about, how far they pull to the left on those progressive ideas. That's really going to be more a dictator of what the competition could potentially look like in the fall.
Yeah, but here's my question, Leslie, and it's something that Major Garrett pointed to earlier, and I want to flesh out a bit, which is when we first started to see this process play out in 2015, we watched Donald Trump get up there with all those, 20 or so, maybe, more than 17 Republicans, people who had been in government for a very long time, the Mitt Romneys and the Ted Cruzes, and you were there, right? And so everybody, we sat at this table and we said, does Donald Trump have a chance? And everybody, what are you, crazy? He's talking about building a wall and banning Muslims and calling Mexicans, rapists and drug dealers. Not a chance. I wonder if the media, people who make a living talking about this sort of stuff, if we should take what Major pointed to, which is that there is a desire, a yearning from those who are Democrats on the left to get somebody, yes, who can beat Donald Trump, but also who has some fresh, new ideas, and maybe they are considered, as somebody pointed out, I don't remember who yesterday, much in the same way that when LBJ Lyndon Baines Johnson proposed Medicare, that people thought that was crazy, but it's not anymore.
Right.
Isn't that what we're sort of seeing right now as we head to 2020?
There's no doubt that what happened post-Trump is definitely a fracturing of what traditional establishment parties look like. So not only did it break the back of many would say the Freedom Caucus on the right and some of those hardliners who would not look at immigration reform, but on the left, the Democrats, now you have more moderates and centrists who are actually on a stage pushing back against a big a progressive pull on the left of more Medicare for all. And some of the policies, you're exactly right, that were so unorthodox 4 years ago that now are becoming part of the Democratic mainstream. So it's actually good in this political ecosystem to have that fresh blood, kind of change the ideas, change the conversation so they can be more relative to what voters are really experiencing. Donald Trump had the ability to tap into a signal that, and people say it was nationalism and kind of race tinged, but it was a signal where they felt that America was on its heels. And they really wanted somebody who was going to punch back. I cannot tell you how many focus groups across the country, even that I do recently, and they will say those words. I want a president who's going to fight for America. So think about how the president lines that up. It doesn't have to be eloquent, but it has to be consistent. So this is going to be an election about style on, though he's standing on that value, and there's not a lot of other values around it, but that one is very clear, and that's what we're looking for from the left.
Because that's part of what Major said, too. It was about tapping into emotion, and that's what he said he wanted to see from Biden, and I don't know if we saw that last night because it was such a reasonable conversation.
Let me back up a step to your point. I think we saw that with Barack Obama. Barack Obama tapped into a group of people, whether you agree or not, that have felt left out of the conversation, felt like their voice have not been heard. They have not been inspired enough to be engaged and involved. That's why we saw people who have never been involved in elections before knock doors and give $5 here, $10 here. We saw the same thing with Donald Trump. The people he brought out did not vote for Romney, did not vote for McCain.
And Bernie Sanders.
And they came out for Donald Trump. And I think this election, you will see part of that. But I think the key for Democrats is being inclusive, bringing along those people and helping find their voice, but also bringing people who have been around, who have been a part of the conversation, but just have not seen their situation change. And that's why I go back to we must focus on quality of life issues, and we must highlight the places where even this new wave of ideas that Donald Trump has brought, there's still been people who have been left out of the conversation.
The difference with Barack Obama, though, it was generational. So that was a generational election. If you think the generation stops at about age 44, 45, there was a clear split of who favored above and below that line. And that continued to make an impact, especially in a very dynamic Democratic Party.
It strikes me, though, and I had this discussion again earlier this morning with Robbie Mook, which is, if you recall, back in 2007, the entire party was behind Hillary Clinton. And all of a sudden, Barack Obama was rising, and people said, no, this is Hillary's time. This is her chance. And then Barack Obama just blew it up. And you had Senator Edward Kennedy coming out and saying, this is the lion of the left. This is the leader of the Democratic Party in a way, saying, I'm putting my chips with Barack Obama. The question is, have we seen a Barack Obama type candidate last night, and will we see one today that can defeat a Joe Biden in the primary?
We will not. There's only one Barack Obama. There's only one Donald Trump, we hope. But we will not see those type of candidates emerge again because they're one of a kind, one of a generational. But I do think what they have tapped into is the fact that there are people who are angry and frustrated and felt like the system has not worked for them. And so they've put together a message, whether you agree with Trump or not. His message has tapped into something. Whether you were inspired by Barack or not, or agree with his politics, his resume and his message inspired people to get up. You had women, older women. I can speak to one, Ms. Donnella Wilson, who was 104 years old at the time, who started out as a Clinton supporter, but then a few weeks after hearing Barack's speech, she was like, I never imagined seeing this in my lifetime, 100 and some odd years old. And so he was able to tap into the emotions of people. And sometimes emotions mean more than anything in this business that we're in.
Yeah. So, but, you know, when we look at Michigan, right, the president won Michigan. Not by a lot, but by
votes.
enough. Right. So it's those 11,000 that you're trying to win back. The Democratic Party is trying to win back, right? And I know you've got to sort of get through the primary system first, and perhaps primary voters lean more progressive than the general population. But do you think what you heard on the stage yesterday, do you think those are the sort of messages that will woo those people back who voted for Donald Trump, those crucial 11,000?
Well, part of it. But I think when we talk about Michigan, we talk about the Rust Belt, and we talk about the margins Hillary lost, what we do not often talk about is that we did not maximize African-American turnout in those places. Had we ticked up the numbers in a few places, a few counties where you have large pockets of the most loyal voting bloc of this party, African-American voters, that election would have looked a whole lot different. And the fact of the matter is we tapped into those places in 2018. We just did not do it effectively in 2016. And so this idea that we have to win over white working class to be successful in Michigan, that's not necessarily true. We have to win some of them, but if we tap into the strong pockets of African American voters, we can be successful.
That's been an argument that I could go sing all day on that argument on Latino vote. If Democrats sat around and thought about just percentage-wise of Latino vote that they say 45% being strong blue dog Democrat would turn out, there's reasons why some underserved communities do and don't vote. But my pushback would be that any battleground state where there's too close to call elections. Going back since the last turn of the century, we've had these consistent elections that are very, very close. All of these groups matter. It's not just African American, it's working class white, it's Latino, it's women, it's divorced women. I mean, Republicans don't talk, to certain types of constituencies. It's people, communities of faith, different faiths. So, get the black churches mobilized, and that could fall under another faith initiative. There's so many pockets, and many times these campaigns are colorblind or just kind of unaware of how difficult it is to be inclusive all the way along the line. And that's why they go back to the same party patterns. So I think Antjuan's right. Every one of these constituencies is
But I also think, I feel like now more than ever, when you talk about the Hispanic vote and the African American vote, you're not talking about a monolithic group at all. We talked about the divisions between generations, but I think it's the same thing for Hispanics too, between socioeconomic status. I mean, that's one of the things that's so annoying about the president, is he seems to think that every time you talk about the African American voter, you should talk about the criminal justice system or unemployment.
Should be happy.
As if there aren't more affluent African Americans that aren't impacted directly by those two things. Those two issues.
And no, I don't want to give Antjuan a sense to comment on that, but you're exactly right. And now when you just look at the most recent polls, they ask Latino voters, do you think that Trump's comments are racist? And you had 44% who said they're not. And people were extremely shocked. It shows just the difference in how generationally and attitudinally things have changed with communities of color.
I think what we're as we discover who we are as Democrats, the one thing that we found to be true, and I think everybody in the party understands, is that we cannot be successful without maximizing African American votes. Doug Jones would not be the senator from Alabama if that was not the case. If we did not overperform in the midterms, we would not have the most diverse majority in this nation's history. So when I look at places in the Rust Belt, when I look at places I traveled to with and for Hillary Clinton, some of those places, we did not do our just due, as we say in the South, and making sure we make the right investments in these places from a high-tech and a high-touch standpoint. And as a result, we did not win. But we got it right in the midterms. And so there's no need to invent the wheel twice. Let's recreate what we did, expand our political palette, bring along some people who did not come with us in 2016. And if we put together that formula that elected Bill Clinton twice and elected Barack Obama twice, we will change the occupant of the White House. I'm convinced.
They were much more centrist. But, a lot of those Democrats, Bill Clinton, a great example, that were much more centrist.
Yeah.
We'll see how it plays out. I know one good news for Democrats is some of those centrist candidates yesterday were asked after saying, look, Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren have some socialist ideas, that they said that they would support whoever the eventual nominee is of the party.
I think that's important.
That's very important.
Yeah.
Thank you guys as always.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Yeah.